Do not judge, or you too will be judged. From the same way you judge others, you will be judged, and with the measure you use, it will be measured to you. Why do you look at the speck of sawdust in your own brother's eye, and pay no attention to the plank in your own eye? How can you say to your brother, "Let me take the speck out of your eye," when all the time there is a plank in your eye? You hypocrite! First take the plank out of your own eye, and then you will see clearly to remove the speck from your brother's eye. Do not give to dogs what is sacred, and do not throw your pearls to pigs. If you do, they may trample them under their feet, and turn and tear you to pieces. Ask, and it will be given to you. Seek, and you will find. Knock, and the door will be opened to you. For everyone who asks receives, the one who seeks finds, and to the one who knocks, the door will be opened. Which of you, if your son asks for bread, will give him a stone? Or if he asks for a fish, give him a snake? If you, then, though you are evil, know how to give good gifts to your children, how much more will your Father in heaven give good gifts to those who ask him? So in everything, do to others what you would have them do to you. For this sums up the law and the prophets. Now the beginning of Matthew 7 perhaps offers us a bit of a reprieve from the last two times. We've heard those challenging teaching about our anger, about love, those who hurt us, about being generous rather than storing up stuff, and of course that final thing there, not to live hypocritical lives. And so in response to these challenges, Jesus has encouraged us not to judge others as we struggle with this way of life. Perhaps we could say, have grace for one another. Yet of course that reprieve is short-lived, because we equally hear the challenge to notice that plank, to be self-aware, so that we can love our neighbours, so that we can live this vision of the Beatitudes. Jesus summarises this teaching with these words: do not do to others what you would have them do to you, for this sums up the law and the prophets. So remember this teaching: do to others what you would have them do to you, as we perhaps listen to this concluding words, the concluding teaching of Jesus in Matthew 7. Enter through the narrow gate, for wide is the gate and broad is the road that leads to destruction, and many enter through it. But small is the gate and narrow the road that leads to life, and only a few find it. Watch out for false prophets. They come in sheep's clothing, but inwardly they are ferocious wolves. By their fruit you will recognize them. Do people pick grapes from thorn bushes, or figs from thistles? Likewise, every good tree bears good fruit, but a bad tree bears bad fruit. A good tree cannot bear bad fruit, and a bad tree cannot bear good fruit. Every tree that does not bear good fruit is cut down and thrown into the fire. Thus, by the fruit you will recognize them. And not everyone who says to me, Lord, Lord, will enter the kingdom of heaven, but only the one who does the will of the Father who is in heaven. Many will say to me on that day, Lord, Lord, did we not prophesy in your name, and in your name drive out demons, and in your name perform many miracles? Then I will tell them plainly, I never knew you. Away from me, you evildoers. Therefore, everyone who hears these words of mine and puts them into practice is like a wise man who built his house on rock. The rain came down, the streams rose, and the winds blew and beat against the house. Yet it did not fall, because it had its foundation on the rock. But everyone who hears these words of mine and does not put them into practice is like a foolish man who built his house on sand. The rain came down, the streams rose, and the winds blew and beat against the house, and it fell with a great crash. When Jesus had finished saying these things, the crowds were amazed at his teaching, because he taught as one who had authority, and not as their teachers of the law. Home is where the heart is, and there's no place like home. They are evocative phrases because home is often important to us. And this harvest, All We Can's theme is the phrase, charity begins at home. Another evocative phrase. And so today we're thinking of our homes and the homes of others. So let's start with our home. After all, this is what, of course, the phrase charity begins at home tends to refer to. The path through the wide gate uses it cynically, often suggesting we shouldn't do anything to tackle poverty and injustice abroad, because poverty exists in our own communities. We should get our own house in order before helping others. So goes the logic. And the phrase has, of course, been used about 110 times in Parliament over the last 20 years. Most often in debates related to foreign aid or refuge, suggesting that those things shouldn't be prioritised. Yet it's this path through that wide gate which doesn't offer life to many people in our world. But is there something in it? Is there something really in this phrase, charity begins at home? Well, our concluding part of Matthew 7 of this Sermon on the Mount has the parable of the wise and foolish builder. And this, might have something to tell us about looking after our own homes as well as acting justly, loving mercy and walking humbly with God. One lesson it might teach us is the importance of sustainability. For who is better positioned to help others after the rains and wind? It is, of course, in this parable, the wise person with their house intact. They are free to go out and help others. To be sustained and consistent in our desire to help others, we need to have a firm foundation. Now, last week we discovered the Lord's Prayer is central in Jesus' Sermon on the Mount. The passage today also shows that our foundation to hear Jesus' words and put them into practice is important for sustainability. We are not to be those hypocrites, people who say they follow Jesus, but bear bad fruit, such as, being stingy. Instead, Jesus calls us to be generous and do to others as we would have to do to us. So we are in a better position to help others when our foundation is in Jesus' Sermon on the Mount, because we will be well practiced in our care for our communities. Our spiritual lives are not separate from our desire to do justice, because we are called not to be hypocrites, putting on a performance, but to live what we believe. So prayer, that is central in the Sermon on the Mount, helps us to tune into God's desires for our communities and the world. And so this is one way that charity might begin at home holds true. We have responsibility for our own spiritual lives, and our foundation in Christ affects how we effectively can build God's kingdom, this kingdom of the skies, this vision in the Beatitudes. We need to be able to sustain acts of justice and mercy, even when times are tough. We cannot do this if we neglect our faith and neglect our own community. Of course, the other way the parable helps us to think about charity, beginning at our home, is that it provides a warning against the path through the wide gate of rushing in without thought or expertise. In their desire to do something, in their desire to finish the job quickly, the second builder ends up in a worse position than they started. And sometimes this is what All We Can hear from their local partners in low-income countries. Stories of other organisations or, well-meaning individuals who have come into their communities through the wide gate with the best of intentions, wanting to make a difference to people living in poverty. But their good causes more harm. By moving too quickly, immediately setting up a project that might have worked elsewhere, but not really taking time to be led by the expertise of local people, not building any long-term capacity to maintain the project. The project may either not work to begin with, or it can't be sustained once those external organisations have left. So the parable warns us against the wide gate of quick fixes and a lack of self-reflection, because it does not lead to sustained life. Now, this is not to say that once you have solved a problem in your own home, you have that moral authority and know how to tell other people how to solve their own problems. Self-awareness and knowledge of what we are and what's not best placed to offer is another key component of acting justly and loving mercy. So then, in the sense that we are responsible for our own spiritual foundation, that self-awareness is vital. The traditional meaning of charity beginning at home holds true. But where it doesn't hold true is when false prophets and teachers of Jesus, those false teachers of Jesus, use the phrase, charity begins at home, to justify our disconnection from injustice elsewhere in the world. The truth is, it's not, of course, an either or, it's a both and. The narrow gate of justice is mutually reinforcing. When we serve our own communities in a humble, trusting, locally led way that helps us do so elsewhere. But at the same time, embodying good practices of justice in the global context can also give us fresh perspectives of acting justly and loving mercy in our own context. The narrow gate of compassion breeds more compassion. And so acting justly and loving mercy brings more justice seeking. Now we've covered our home. We're going to now insert a new word into that classic phrase. Charity begins at their home. It'd be very easy at this point to cast ourselves in the role of that wise builder with lots of expertise and skills, and imagine that the kinds of low-income communities are those, foolish builders who need to be told what to do by those wise outsiders. This is very much, of course, one of these pass through the wide gate, and much of international development work is historically being based on that kind of assumption. Or too often we over-evaluate our own wisdom, forgetting the plank in our own eye, and under-evaluate the wisdom of people experiencing poverty or injustice. So then, what is the alternative? Well, it's not the central thrust really of this story here. Something else of the parable of the wise and foolish builder reveals is that God gives us freedom. Freedom to build our own homes. Even in testing conditions, God still allows the two builders to try and find their own solutions. The second builder might have made foolish choices, but there were choices to make. The parable doesn't end with God building the house for them. Personal freedom, autonomy are important to God. So why is it when we seek to alleviate poverty and tackle injustice, whether in our own country or overseas, we often remove freedom of choice from the people we seek to help? This is how it's going to be done, can often be the motto. And this is something that All We Can are very keen to avoid. They believe that when it comes to international development, charity needs to begin in the homes of the people they seek to support. So what we're going to do now is hear from Cynthia.
I was already giving up. Got children, you have to go be telling people no food to eat. So the best thing I could do is to die. Because I got tired of my children. Everybody is looking up to me and they are not getting anything. My auntie told me, school was not for women. I said, I want to go to school. And she said that she don't have the hair because at the time my father was dead. And I saw hatred rising from all anger, which caused me to leave home and get into the street.
In the context of Liberia, majority of our people are illiterate. After the Civil War, a whole generation have missed out on education. Mothers around here are single mothers, and upbringing of a child, just a single person, and then more you can read and write, you almost like in the dark.
I heard about this school through a little girl who called me Auntie. But we can say no, but then let's start with the actual illiteracy so you can be able to write your name.
Literacy is the bedrock for our organization. I see adult literacy as the thread that holds everything together. Help them to be able to find something to do, maybe a job. It builds self-confidence and self-esteem. For those who can read and write, some of them have very brilliant ideas, but they don't see themselves as people who are worthy of any contribution. They don't think that they have anything to offer. And then when people are making decisions, they don't count on them. So most of the benefit that they should have gotten, even from government or other sources, it doesn't reach them.
For a woman to get a literacy skill, it's important. That means I can read my name. It's good to know what you want to be and what you want to do. So it's good for a woman to learn to read and write.
Most of what we're hearing from the learners, we're completing is that to read and write is good, but after that, what next? We are led by the community and the issues impacting them. In fact, they have more ideas better than us. They know exactly their issues. The community has so much. You just need somebody to help them to see clearly what they have and how best to value what they have and make use of it.
I graduated from year 2017. I got the machine. I started practicing on my own. And I started getting customers small. I started getting strength.
Kids who have vocational skills, they quickly become independent, generating some funding to help themselves. They are able to advocate for themselves. They make their own decisions.
Tutoring job means a lot to me because I said now I'm able to feed myself, help my children with their schooling. You can see me now, I can sew my clothes. I have one glass guide, one white glass with a shower stepper. And I wore this to service for 3 years. People who saw it only felt it was a uniform, not knowing it was the only clothes that I have to wear. And today, I can change clothes any hour, anytime. I got free now. Yes, nobody can come to me. I'm giving up. You don't give what you don't have.
The significance of the partnership with All We Can. One of the good things is they said to us, we're not here to tell you do this or do that. We see them as a true partner. True partners will work with you in a way that when they are gone, you're much more better than they met you.
Shift have caused me today that I can sing. I was a baker, but today I'm not a giver because I'm not only eating my own, I'm also stretching it. Yeah.
We invite you to join Shift today to help communities to tailor their journeys and fulfill their potential.
So we heard about Cynthia, who at one stage was living on the streets of Monrovia, with only one set of clothes. Cynthia discovered the work of All We Can's local partner, who provided her first with adult literacy classes, and later a vocational training course in tailoring. These stories are possible because All We Can supports the local partner with their strategic planning, provide leadership training, and contribute to their costs. But just as important as what All We Can did do is what they chose not to do. All We Can didn't buy Cynthia a sewing machine. They did not tell Cynthia what career she should pursue, did not swoop in, establish some project and then quickly withdraw. They didn't do these things because the freedom and autonomy God gives us is not ours to take away. And again, Jesus taught us, do to others what you would have them do to you. So charity begins at home does mean we have a responsibility to use our harvest to support communities around the world. But only through that narrow gate where it is led by people whose home is in the local community. Trusting people to take the lead in their own development also leads, of course, to better outcomes and will sustain life. So the truth is, not one is more familiar with the rains coming down and the streams rising in a particular community than the people who live there. Solutions that are developed by local communities invariably trump those that are imported by people with little knowledge of their context. And the director, Jeremiah, whom we've met before, also knows that to build sustainable change, you need to be rooted in God. He takes inspiration from John Wesley's expression that man cannot do anything on the earth without God. And God will not do anything on the earth without, well, us. But he also knows that sustainable change needs to be rooted in community. Jeremiah says the community already has so much. They just need someone to help them see clearly what they have, how best to value what they have, and make use of it. This is what all we can mean when they say charity begins at home. So to be salt and light, we need to share our harvest that supports others in dignified ways. This will give us a foretaste of the Beatitudes, where the humble in spirit, the meek and merciful, pure in heart, and those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will see the kingdom of heaven on earth. This is Jesus' path through the narrow gate that leads